This is Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Bonnie Marcus, award-winning entrepreneur, Forbes contributing writer, and executive coach. Bonnie Marcus assists professional women to successfully navigate the workplace and their position and promote themselves to advance their careers. And she has just come out with a new book that I am excited to hear about. So welcome, Bonnie Marcus.
Thanks, Nan. It's great to be here.
Bonnie, you've had extensive experience working with women's issues. Tell us what's happening with women today.
Well, the pandemic has put us back quite a bit. When you look at the recent reports, it shows that we won't achieve global gender equity for another 136 years, which is just, it's just terrible. Here in the United States, we certainly aren't paid equally, something like 81 cents to what our male counterparts make. And if you're a woman of color, of course, it's much less than that. So in the workplace itself, we are still facing a very unlevel playing field. And we don't have equal opportunity for sponsorship. We lack sponsorship. We don't have equal opportunity for advancement within that arena. And so the progress that women had been making, even though it was really slow, has kind of, stalled. And it's very frustrating.
It certainly is. It seems like we work so hard. In your book, you talk about the song, Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman. And it started, you say baby boomer in there, and even before that, it was really encouraging people to come into their own. So we've worked so hard to get where we are, and yet it seems like we're going backwards.
Very true. And women, especially in the 45, 50 plus age group, are often finding that they are not acknowledged, not respected, viewed as irrelevant in the workplace as they show visible signs of aging. That's the key. So gendered ageism is based on the fact that women are viewed a little differently than men. As we age, we are subjected to a lot more bias based on our appearance. And in the workplace, women are diminished, often marginalized, sometimes pushed out, but certainly aren't feeling fulfilled in their careers. Like you said, we've got such a great track record. We've worked really hard. A lot of the women that I've interviewed for this book have held high positions, and all of a sudden their workload is being redistributed. And many of these women are being pushed out before they want to retire. And what I talk about certainly in the book is how unfair that is, and that we still have so much to offer. Now, some women may leave the workplace because they're not getting the acknowledgement, because they're not getting the respect, and starting their own businesses. But for the most part, the women who are in the corporate arena are really suffering due to gendered ageism.
Well, you've generally been in the healthcare and software industries, and you've held positions in startup companies as well as Fortune 500 companies. What advice would you give women today who are interested in pivoting to another career, especially if they're over 50?
Well, I think women over 50 need to be aware that it is much more challenging to get another position. That doesn't mean that should stop you, however. One of the things that I want to emphasize, and I certainly emphasize in the book, is that we have so much value yet to contribute. And we need to be aware of that. We need to own it. And if we're being marginalized in the workplace, that doesn't mean that we can't pivot to an entirely different career and continue to offer value. So it's important to really reconnect with everything that you bring to the table, your talent, your wisdom, your experience. And if you have an idea, if there's some way that you can leverage that talent to start a business on your own, I definitely go for it. Don't fall victim to the ageist stereotypes that you're too old to do anything.
Your passion is now to help other women embrace their talents and their ambitions and to step into their full potential and their workplace power. So tell me about this. What are you doing to assist in this area?
Well, what I recognize in my long corporate career is that there were so many talented women who were being passed over because they didn't know how to create visibility and influence. They didn't know how to advocate for themselves. So when I left corporate and wanted to start my own business as an executive coach, there was no doubt that my mission was going to be to help women create that kind of visibility and credibility for themselves. And primarily, that's what I do. I help women connect with their value proposition so that they know how they can best serve their organization and help their business move forward. In my first book, The Politics of Promotion, I lay out 5 tools about what women need to, tools that women need to learn in order to position themselves better in the workplace. And a lot of that has to do with paying attention to the culture, learning how to navigate that, building a strategic network to support your career goal. And yes, learning how to advocate for yourself without it coming across as bragging, by still being your authentic self.
I'm starting to hear women say, is this all there is? And I think what they're talking about is not, have I climbed the ladder high enough, but more into, have I made a difference? Have I made the social justice or whatever kind of difference that is driving them? And they ended up in a career where they're making money, but how do they make that pivot or transition between the money that they're making and going to what their heart might tell them to do?
Well, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So there are very many successful women who remain in their jobs and volunteer or do outside work that really makes a difference. They get involved in some cause that they're passionate about, or they invest in some cause that they're passionate about. They become activists. So it's not like it's mutually exclusive. And in some of the women and some of my former clients that I've talked to, that really helps them balance, especially as we age and maybe we are reaching that point where we have an empty nest. Now we're thinking, well, how can I give back? And my job does not necessarily provide that kind of fulfillment for me, that I can do both. I have the time and the energy and certainly the talent to do both.
And maybe even end up with a side hustle.
Absolutely. Side hustles can be full-time hustles. and I'm definitely a proponent of looking and following up on opportunities that you see. If a door opens, be curious, follow through, see where that's going to lead, because you never know.
I always say you've got to have your antenna up. In other words, you've got to be thinking about oh, I wonder if that would make a difference. I wonder if that's the right thing for me. If you don't have that antenna up, I think it can slip right by you.
And not only that, Nan, just don't sabotage it or close the door and say, oh, I can't do that, or that's not going to work before you get more information or maybe try. Because sometimes I think we're afraid to take the step. We're afraid to make that leap. And, I wouldn't have had the career I've had if I didn't jump on different opportunities, some of which I wasn't even qualified for in the beginning, but I just followed through and tried to do my best, and it worked out.
Well, I'm reading your book, not done yet, How Women Over 50 Regain Their Confidence and Claim Their Workplace Power. And I'm particularly interested in this age group, probably because I'm in it, but I'm very interested in it. And I'm wondering, what do you think are the special needs of women in this age group? And then the second follow-up question will be, and how did you decide to focus in this area?
Well, let me take the second question first.
Okay.
I had about 4 years ago, I was working with a 58-year-old female attorney who worked for a large tech firm here in California. And she had really a great track record, terrific performance. She was on that team for 8 years. Now she was the oldest, and things started to happen. She wasn't invited to key meetings. Nobody sought out her opinion anymore. And what really was damaging, her workload was redistributed. And she knew that was not a good sign, because if I don't have a full portfolio, it'll be much easier to push me out. So I was coaching her through that painful experience. And I said to myself, this is not an isolated situation, that there have to be more women in this age demographic who are feeling also, who are marginalized and feeling diminished. Started to do the research. There isn't a lot, and there isn't the recognition that ageism, and particularly gendered ageism, is a reality in the workplace. I started to do a lot of interviews, and of course, when I reached out to women who were currently employed or recently pushed out, and they were sharing their experiences with me, I was horrified. I mean, these are women who were extremely qualified and just treated like they had no value. They were no longer competent. So I took it on as my cause and my passion. And yes, I am in this age group also. I'm no longer in corporate, but I recognize that this is so damaging for women in this age group. It affects our financial viability. It affects our job security. We think that if we do a great job, we're going to be able to take that experience through retirement, and all of a sudden, we're pushed out. And so, as you can tell, and if you're reading my book, you know that I've become really, really passionate about the unfairness of this all. It's the playing field was not level before, and now it's really tipping as women age, more in favor of men, even in this age group. So that's why I wrote this book. I think what women in this age group need is to understand that gendered ageism is a reality. It's so ingrained in our society that we don't even recognize it for what it is. If somebody says to me, "Oh, Bonnie, you look great," or "You look young," implication is for your age. It's ageist. And it wasn't until I started writing this book that I realized, wow, that's ageist. And I don't even recognize my own beliefs and stereotypes about ageism. And I think that's where we need to start. We need to do some self-reflection and try to understand what some of these limiting beliefs and stereotypes, assumptions about age we have internalized, because they, in fact, can sabotage us and hold us back. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if we believe we're too old to ask for a raise, or we're too old to get promoted, then we are not going to do the things that we need to do to make that happen. You know, we're not going to offer our opinions and speak up. We're not going to ask for that raise, lead with our value, understand the value that we offer our organization, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Do you think it's more prevalent for women than men?
To have ageist beliefs?
Well, to be encountering the, in a sense, discrimination that you're talking about within the companies.
I think we encounter it earlier. That's my point. And we encounter it earlier because of the emphasis on our looks and society's emphasis on youth. So as we show signs of visible signs of aging, Catalyst calls it lookism, then we are viewed as less competent and less valuable. And men have a little bit longer of a runway.
You know, I think it's often surprising to most of us where we may have, as trailblazers, been the youngest around achieving what we did. And when you now turn around, and you're the oldest, you're like, what? How did I get here?
Yeah. And your manager is younger than your children. Yeah. Yeah. But I think we also need to recognize the richness of diversity of thought and diversity of experience in the workplace, and that there could be 5, 6 generations, and we all have so much to learn from each other. And I think that's an important point as well, is that very often millennials will look at boomers and say, oh, you know, you're over the hill. What do you know? And boomers look at millennials and say, oh, you're so entitled, you know, you're too young for this, that, and the other thing. And it isn't until we actually forge some of these relationships one-on-one, reach out and build these relationships, that we're able to push aside some of the stereotypes, because we become real people. We become real people, and we can then recognize the value that each of us bring, and how we can learn from each other, and what we can learn. Yeah, what we can learn from each other.
Do you think admitting your age creates an automatic, like, pigeonholing assumption, which could maybe work against you? Do you think you're better not to say how old you are? Not just in the corporate environment, but in general.
Oh, okay. Because I would say in corporate environment, a lot of the women I interviewed have gone to extremes to hide their age. And I mean, I believe them that if they didn't have eyelift surgery or Botox or fillers or something, they might be subjected to more discrimination. So they were hiding their age. One woman in particular said she won't go into the office on her birthday for fear that somebody's going to say, oh, you know, how old are you? And so she never went. So it can work against you, certainly. And in society in general, I believe, unfortunately, the same is true. That we put people in categories based on their age, and then we make assumptions about them that may or may not be true. We all age differently.
True, true. Let's talk about your coaching business. You've been honored by Globus Gurus as one of the world's top 30 coaches in 2015 to 2021. How does your service differ from what other people offer?
I've never been asked that before. It's a great question. I think it's because I walk the walk. I have actually had my successful career that started at an entry level, and I worked my way up to the C-suite. And I'm an executive coach who is working with women who want to advance their careers and don't know how to do that. And I have actually done it. Now, it wasn't necessarily a straight climb up the ladder. There were some missteps, there were some lateral moves, there were some step backs, but it's from that wealth of experience that I had myself as a woman trying to get ahead in the workplace. And that's the wisdom that I think differentiates me.
I am dying to listen to your podcast, and it's definitely on my to-do list. It's called Badass Women at Any Age. Now, what I enjoyed in the book was your definition of badass women. So tell us about your definition, and then tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, the definition, actually, I can't claim. It came from Katie Couric, who said that a badass woman really defies the patriarchy and hierarchy, as well as the status quo, right? And I've taken that to also be stand in your power, own who you are, own your age, and don't let anyone tell you that you're less than just because of the number of your age. So I have so much fun on this podcast. Every week I interview different women who have overcome different obstacles, faced different challenges, and we take a look at what their journey has been to where they are now. Because I think that is what is so inspiring for my listeners. You look at somebody who's very successful and you have great admiration for them, no doubt. But when you learn what it took to get there, I've interviewed women who were raised in a cult. I've interviewed, one woman, Jessica Buchanan, who was held hostage by Somali pirates. Those are kind of extremes, but there are a lot of women who have started their own businesses, started new initiatives, or who have climbed the ladder and really made a difference in the world. And hearing their story and how they got there gives us all the courage and the confidence to say, we can do it too.
Sounds very much like the podcast that we do, TrailBlazers Impact, same kind of thing. What do you think are the biggest challenges for women entrepreneurs today?
I think the biggest challenge is probably getting venture capital. I think there's still some bias against female founders, especially women of color. And again, we're talking about the unlevel playing field. They are not likely to get the funding that men would with the same idea. So I think that that's definitely probably the biggest challenge that I see.
I have been interviewing some people that were women venture capitalists, and they're saying the same thing, that women just have not had an equal shot at the money. And that, of course, can make a big difference. In your opinion, what are the 3 most important needs of women today?
Across the board, all women. I would say professional women, right? I would say the recognition that we need flexibility, that we have been carrying the burden of all family responsibilities as well as careers. And, our childcare system is terrible. It's very, very expensive. And a lot of women are facing the challenge of trying to balance that. And we continue, even with the younger generations, to have the bulk of the responsibility. I think we need more flexibility. I think more companies need to provide parental leave. I think we need equal pay. I think the companies that are going through and doing an assessment and actually restructuring their compensation system, hats off. I think that's great, but there are only a handful of companies that are doing that. And why shouldn't women be paid equally for the same job with the same experience? And also, equal opportunity overall. The society's stereotypes and assumptions about women at all ages, by the way, because women in their 30s face the motherhood penalty, and women over 50 face gendered ageism. But I think that we need to include more unconscious bias training around gender bias and gendered ageism, so that people realize how powerful some of these stereotypes are that hold women back. We don't get the same, as I said before, opportunities for advancement. We don't get the same opportunities for sponsorship. And as we just said, we don't get the same opportunities for venture capital if we're starting a business. I mean, I could do like a whole long list. And I think we need to, business owners especially, need to take an assessment of what their company's policies and practices are regarding women.
Well, it's just been so interesting to speak with you today. I hope everybody can get your book. Here's the book. And listen to your podcast.
Thank you.
And then you'll hopefully join us on many other ventures that we're going to engage in. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to that. Thank you, Nan.